morning. Thank you for joining. My name is Jill Maneely, and I am the director of DigSite at Question Pro. And we are here today to talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I know our guests are passionate about it as well. And that's all about how you can leverage visuals to really go deeper with participants in qualitative research. So I'm really excited to talk with Wayne and Susanna about this topic. So DigSite, I'm the director of DigSite, and DigSite is a online qualitative platform, and we were acquired by Question Pro just over a year ago in order to add qualitative capabilities to Question Pro's research suite. And so we conduct research with all sorts of clients, and a lot of times we're helping our clients understand their consumers, and particularly their pain points, and helping them develop innovation and communication that better resonates with their consumers. And the way DigSite works is participants will log in. Typically, our studies run 1, 2, or 3 days, and participants will log into our platform and participate in activities for about 10 to 15 minutes a day at any time that's convenient for them. And those activities are designed to get at that business question that our clients have. So I am here with my friends and our clients, Susanna and Wayne Childers, and they run AHA, which is an agency that does strategic planning, innovation, training, and most importantly to me, consumer insight. So I'm so happy to have them here to talk to us about this topic. They led a workshop about this topic at our recent X-Day conference in Austin, Texas. And it was one of the most well-received sessions. So we thought we would bring it back to a larger audience here today. So Wayne and Susanna, thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. It's busy. We got to spend it in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're in the mountains of the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina is where we're located. And we got together with about 18 family members in Charlotte. So it was fun.
Nice. And did you do any cooking, or were you just guests?
Yes, both. we were guests, and we spent a lot of time cooking for 18. So 2 turkeys, smoked turkeys, the whole 9 yards, all the sides you can imagine. So yeah, it was great.
Awesome. That's great. I'm on the completely other side of the country from you in Portland, Oregon, but I was in Indiana with my family, and we had a deep fried turkey. So that was
and nothing caught on fire.
Nothing caught on fire. Okay, well, let's jump into our topic. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and the type of work you do?
Sure. So AHA was founded in 1997, and we really sit at the intersection of a couple of important areas that we're passionate about. Number one, visual thinking, using visuals to really expand and enhance whatever work you're doing, team learning, and facilitative leadership. I'm going to go to the next one. There we go. We serve teams primarily in 4 areas. Consumer and customer insight. We do a lot of work within the CPG space as well as other categories as well. A lot of innovation work, strategic planning, and training and tools. Really, the mission that we have is to engage teams to unlock new ideas, inspire people, and illuminate new possibilities. And we do a lot of that through qualitative research. We developed an approach that we call Learn and Connect. We just developed it 27 years ago. And it's really, it flips the script on what traditional qualitative research used to be. In that, it really does build shared knowledge as opposed to only held within one or small handful of people. It creates authentic connections to build empathy with whoever you're learning from, whether it's products or services. It's conversations and stories, and importantly, not an interview. Highlight that. We like to go below the surface. It's deeper, non-cognitive work as opposed to binary bits and bytes. And it leverages visual thinking, which is images and graphic templates to help the team as well as whoever's participating in the study see what we're trying to explore. In terms of, you want to flip the next slide, Suze? How it looks on paper, if you like journey maps, is we've got kind of a long and winding road, and it's not your typical qualitative process, right? It's more like designs and sprints today, where you've got to start up to really clarify exactly what it is you want to explore. We design structured conversations that are in person and virtual. There is no back room in terms of a glass mirror in between us. We go out, we actively collect the data wherever the teams need to do that, whether that's in store, in home, in the workplace. And then the team comes back and we do collective synthesis together, as opposed to just the agency writing the report and then handing it off for what we hope is the delivery. What we find out of that is much more engaged learning by the team, as well as bigger insights and much stronger traction going forward with whatever the action that they're looking to take going down the road.
Awesome. Thank you. So tell us about how visuals are useful to you as part of your process, especially the qualitative research aspect.
Yeah, this is a topic we love to talk about, which is kind of how visuals fit in. That you can see just from the slides that we shared, we're all about visual thinking, both in terms of sharing information, which we'll talk about. But the focus of this webinar, just to reiterate what I think Jill mentioned earlier, is that we're going to focus today on collecting information and building insights more than just how to transform the data that you may already have into presentations. We can touch on that, but the focus of this is kind of why visual thinking and how it works, but really how it will help us to learn from customers and consumers or employees. So any of the internal work, customers, internal. Really, where it all starts is we think in pictures and metaphors. So, for example, when I say the word cat, most of you don't think of C-A-T in terms of the letter or the words. You think of the fluffy orange tabby cat or the cute little kitten that we did get to play with at Thanksgiving. So we're always imagining things in terms of metaphors in our minds. We're using the visual cortex, which is the largest system in the human brain, to do that. And what visuals do is it helps to focus our attention and improve synthesis. So sitting in a meeting room, sitting around a boring boardroom table, you find yourself snoozing. People are taking notes. Everyone's wondering, what are they writing? Are they writing their shopping list, or are they having some brilliant insight that no one else knows about? We like to really make that all visible, because one of the core things on the slide that Wayne was talking about was it's really about team learning. In an organization, when people are trying to understand from their customers, the goal is to get everybody learning the same thing. And we want to improve the synthesis of that. Studies have shown that there's a 30% increase in retention and recall of information. In fact, there have been some studies recently at the university level where professors had people take notes, take visual notes or sketch noting, some people might have seen, versus just listening aloud. And no surprise, the group that took the sketch notes and helped to visualize it were the ones who retained the information the best and did the best on the exams. So if that's our goal, is to help people understand, then that's great. I don't know if we're all getting feedback on that or I'm just hearing that, but Danielle, I don't know if we need to mute people or cut that off so we don't get any feedback loop there. When we think about visual thinking in groups, it's really about using large charts and templates. And you might have noticed in our introductory slide, some folks, as we talked about Learning Connect, being able to see the information as it's being collected. It allows the group to see the big picture faster and learn more, having higher levels of comprehension. And so this would be both from your customers, your employees, or your consumers in the consumer research that we do, leading to higher levels of comprehension. It allows people to think together. So as we're having a conversation, not just sitting around, the stereotypical focus group table, it allows the group not to so much engage in groupthink, but to build on each other's ideas and see that, because everyone has a chance to feel heard. We've seen dramatic transformations from kind of the 3-minute I get to say what's on my mind versus like yes and building and using themes from and strategies from improv to do that. It boosts creativity when we have visuals, and we'll talk more about that as well. It improves listening because you're seeing something too. So we're using all of our different senses. We're seeing what's going on as well as hearing it. And because you're focusing on that, you're not spending so much time focusing on what you're going to say next. So it allows a group to really think together and be more productive. And what it's doing is it's reflecting and engaging the group with that information to get them there a lot faster. The way this happens is because of how our brains are wired. And I am not a brain scientist, so a big disclaimer on that. So if anyone out there knows more about this, this is just kind of a general understanding of how the brain works. The largest portion of our brain is the neocortex, and that's where our rational thinking, our cognitive thinking brain goes. And that's what we get trained a lot in school. So we want to have the right answers. We want to sound smart. We want to do things the correct way. But a lot of what goes into, and that's the biggest portion of our brain, but there's a visual part there. What the visual cortex does is it goes into the limbic brain, which is the emotions and the feelings. And you've probably heard about the brain, the heart, and the gut in terms of, we're really trying to tap into that whole thing, but simplifying it to just the brain in our head. The limbic portion of the brain is where our emotions and our feelings come from. And we know that people don't necessarily make rational decisions. And what they say in research, whether it's consumer research or employee research, employee engagement, is not necessarily how they feel. They're trying to give the answer that I think I'm supposed to give. That's from the cortex. We're trying to use visuals to get into the limbic portion of the brain. And of course, then we're probably familiar with our high school biology in terms of the reptilian brain, and that's fight or flight and breathing and things like that. We're not trying to alter that. What we're trying to do is to get below the surface, get more than words. The words are in the neocortex. The visuals come in terms of the limbic portion of the brain. So Jill, you want me to just talk a little bit more about some of the ways that we use visuals then? Oh, now somebody's muted Jill. We can't hear her.
I muted myself because I was worried about the echoing. Yeah, that would be great if you could share some examples of how this comes to life and how you get your research participants to go deeper with visuals and how your studies really bring this to life.
So one of the things that we do is we use pictures. This is a visual here where you see a bunch of just magazine pictures. And this was a case example because obviously we can't share proprietary client research, but this was a case study that we had done where the topic was, the case was for a travel agency, a travel planning company. And the topic was to try and understand what their ideal vacation experience would be like. So experience research. In this case, we had a group of panelists from Latin America tell us stories. And they told us stories by using visuals. So they picked a picture. The little sticky notes that you can see on them are their titles that they gave them. So their caption or a title. The bigger stickers we put on after the fact in terms of just making sure we were cataloging that. Because we look at the pictures as part of the data set that we're collecting, even though it is qualitative. So in this case, we had 9 pictures, and they told stories about what those vacations would be like. That's not necessarily an atypical use of visuals in research. That's been around for a long time, kind of as an introduction or something like that. What we do that's a little bit different is we take those pictures and we start to do some analysis with them. We do know that when we use a picture, it allows people to think, to tap into their emotions and to tell stories that are much different than just if I'd had to sit here at an interview and telling me about yourself. You know, that's tell me what your ideal vacation is. Well, I might like it to be, and you'd get some of it, but you wouldn't go as deep and you wouldn't feel the emotions in that. And that's what we're going for by using pictures. What we do with those pictures after the fact is go through a visual analysis process. And you may not be able to see on your computer screens all of the details here, but we take that set of pictures and we start to organize them and look at them. We're looking for patterns and themes within those. We're looking for visual elements that might tell us a little bit. So the theory behind this goes into Jungian psychology, and also not a Jungian psychologist, but looking at the dream state and what are the images and metaphors that are present in a set of pictures mean, and what understanding might we gain from that. We're not looking to try and psychoanalyze a person or even a group of people, but we're trying to get some insights and understanding to help give us some stimulus and ideas about what might be going on beyond the words, behind the words. So in this case, we grouped the pictures and we started seeing things. Now, if I could have you all talking to me, I'd let you tell me what you see. But what groups have seen over doing analysis is we see lots of pairs of people. We see a couple of sailboats, which is kind of unusual. We see lots of greens and blues, earthy colors connecting, out on the earth, on the ground. Not a lot of skyscrapers and indoor buildings. So we're not seeing a lot of that. What we do next is we start to interpret that. And we would say, with our research question being, what's the desired vacation experience, and how might we create vacation packages if you were a travel planning company? How does this start to inform our understanding of that in terms of what people are looking for? And so we might start to come up with ideas in terms of that people, the interpretation of some of these things are that people want growth, a lot of the greenery, they want companionship in terms of being with a partner. And then we would translate those into certain ideas like a romantic getaway or getting in touch with nature somewhat more than perhaps other groups. Where we know that where this comes to life is when we compare and contrast that with other subgroups. So that might be a certain segment of the population within one region, or in this case, we've done this research through our trainings all around the world, and we have sets of pictures from other countries, like China, for example. Those Chinese pictures look a lot different than those pictures from the folks in Latin America. And I can talk about the sources. We use in this case, we use magazine pictures that were pulled from local magazines so that it's imagery that is consistent with the culture in which you're researching. So in this case, the people in China came and did these, and these were conducted in English, but they were Chinese speakers. So sometimes they wrote in English and sometimes like this in Chinese in terms of their captions. And here we see really different visual look. If I pan back to the other one, we saw earthy tones, greens, water. In this one, we see a lot more wide open spaces. We see water, but it's kind of a brighter blue water. We see big space. We see one couple, but otherwise we see people by themselves or we see people with families. We also see all of these kind of round things and traditional kinds of things that are a little bit different than we see in other countries. So we start to look at that and say, well, what might we want to do if we're a global travel business? What might we do for people in China? You can start to see, and you can see how this would also then translate into how do you communicate what you learn from this. We show people the actual pictures. So, spoiler alert, in terms of your presentations, you bring the pictures into the room as you're trying to communicate that to other stakeholders. So we see in this case, things we already talked about there. Looking at another region, we did this in Europe. And we also did it in North America and South Africa as well. But just looking at Europe, you see a lot more blue. You see open water, big skies, really blue, contrasted with the ones on this side that are bright, vibrant. These were Europeans, not in Africa, but the pictures of the colors and the themes out of Africa came in there as well. Really different when you compare what we saw in Europe to what we saw in China to what we saw in Latin America. And then you can start to say, all right, if that's our data, our visual data in this case, what do we do with that in terms of our learning? Well, we create some visual maps and start to say, all right, how do we think about, and this is a big summary here, but what's the desired experience? How does that compare across the regions? What are some ideas, packages, like vacation packages in this idea, that being the research question or the outcome? And then we could go on to fill in what some of the ideas are there in terms of what messages people are looking for. So you can see that one example of how we used visuals to glean information from this. And I can tell you that having done this exercise and used these images with people doing the analysis themselves, there is a lot of validation in terms of from a research side that people come up with the same learning, the same interpretations, and the same ideas coming forward from that. So that's a little bit about how we use visuals to collect data. So we're having people pull stories. They're sharing their stories and their words, and we can get transcripts and we can analyze what they've said as well. But just wanting to show you a little bit about how the words play into that. We got to unmute you again, Jill.
Very cool. Thank you. Are you going to share the other example, or do you want me to share some of my examples?
We can talk. Yeah, we can talk a little bit. I think
We can do both.
Wade's going to talk a little bit about how we're sharing online. So that was an in-person example, but let's share a little bit about what that would look like when we do this online. Let's see. There's some examples there.
Let's unmute. There we go. So this example actually was on DigSite. It was virtual, and we were doing user experience work for a kitchen supply and cooking school in North America. This particular business had been up and running for a while. They had a cooking school that was associated with the primary business, which was a kitchen supply store, and they were really looking to figure out, all right, what's going to be the most effective promotions? How am I going to drive more traffic through my stores beyond just holiday sales? How can I convert more users for multiple purchase? Like all the typical things that a brand's looking to do to get higher leverage out of their existing business. When we created a DigSite, we had some of their customers enter, and we had them tell us a story around the ideal experience as well as the current experience. We didn't we didn't disseminate and we didn't say it's about cooking or it's kitchen supply, but what came forward was all the stories were about the cooking portion. And if you've ever been to a cooking school before or a cooking class before, there's two types. There's the ones where the chef is standing behind the counter and there's a whole series of mirrors and you're kind of removed from it taking notes. There's also a hands-on demo, which this particular client had been doing a fair amount of those. What they realized coming out of this research, which was a big shift for them strategically, was all the stories were about the cooking school. Not about shopping for stuff, not about buying, a nice Wusthof knife or Calphalon or Le Creuset. It was all about the cooking, and not only just the cooking, but the hands-on component and what the cooking enabled them to do in their life. So it really expanded their understanding of what people saw them as. They saw them as a destination to create more connections. So out of that, they made a pretty important shift. The owner said, I used to think that I had a kitchen supply store that offered cooking classes. What I now realize is what my core business is. And oh, by the way, these people spend 3x higher. Their profitability was 2x higher, and they're more likely to repeat. So he's like, I have a cooking school that happens to sell cooking supplies, right? So it totally shifted their model and gave them a whole new avenue to really expand their business and engage their customers in a whole new way. Again, all from just talking about what their experience was with this approach.
I'm getting hungry looking at these pictures.
Yeah, and the cool thing is it's not just the demo of cooking, but it's the kinesthetic activity, whether I'm doing it for my family, whether I'm doing it with my family, whether I'm doing it for others. But that's what the whole thing led to, was something greater than just how do I mix 3 ingredients and make great bread. It's how do I extend beyond that.
That's cool. And so I think that experience of the way that these studies where we use visuals really land so much more deeply with clients, because they're really getting much more of a story when they see these pictures and when they really understand the deeper feelings that are coming through with this sort of research.
Yeah, it becomes a much more human experience, and this is not to elevate qualitative over quantitative at all, because the quantitative is really important, understanding the metrics and the KPIs and all the other pieces that are critical to a business. But it adds another layer. It's a soul and a voice that often is devoid, and it brings some of the why. Like, why is my cooking business growing so rapidly and the other portions of my business are fairly static when I'm running more promotions on the other portions of my business? Why is that? I mean, that's really where this started, to trying to untangle that little Gordian knot around a particular business problem.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue to the first example I have to share. So if we could switch to my slide. So these are some examples of when I've used visuals in some of the studies we've done in DigSite. So this is an example from a study where we were looking at some different packaging for a product that participants would be buying, a personal care product. And there were a couple different versions of the packaging, and the client wanted to take a step back and understand the mindset that the consumer was in when they were shopping for this product, because it was sort of a sensitive area, sensitive topic, a sensitive thing that they were experiencing when they were shopping. So they wanted to make sure they had that state of mind clear as reference or as background for understanding what the reaction was to the packaging. So what we did is we asked participants who had all been in this situation when they needed this product, we asked them if they could share a picture that represents how they were feeling when they were going to shop for this product. And this is an example of one of the images that came from one of the participants. And then they explained. And you can see how the language that they use is so much richer just because they picked this photo. The language they're using to describe how they were feeling is actually richer than if you just asked them how they were feeling because of the photo. So you can see here they're talking about the fact that it's this shattered windshield and it's the internal chaos that she was feeling when she had to buy this product. So right now you've got this great picture of kind of what's in this participant's mindset as she goes to buy this product.
And I would say that Jill, anyone looking at that picture immediately gets a gut reaction and a feeling about that. And so being able to use that to go beyond the words and share more than words in terms of how the consumer could communicate, as well as then you sharing that out with anyone else, we're going to just understand it that much more deeply in the limbic portion of our brain.
Exactly, yes. And so what we found was we then moved on to the next phase where they reacted to some different versions of the packaging. And some of the versions of the packaging were very bold and attention getting. And then some of the versions of the packaging were much more soothing and subtle and comforting. And those were the packages that resonated most with the consumers. And you could understand now when you saw what state of mind they were in, that they really needed to be kind of like comforted, cared for, and not further escalating their trauma by seeing these bold colors. And so when you were talking about how impactful this can be for clients, the client in this case actually took some of the visuals that came from how the participants were feeling and shared those up on the wall in a room for their team so that they could really get into the headspace of people who are shopping for their product. So it really helped them go deeper.
Super powerful.
It's very powerful. So another example. So typically the way this works is we ask participants to find a picture, and then they can just go on Google or within their own photos and share the picture, and they upload that to DigSite, and then they explain it. So this is another example, and this was a study we were doing about trying to find out why people weren't using public transportation more often, and what were some of the reasons that you might consider using public transportation a bit more. And so this is an example of one participant who was talking about the beauty of the area where they live and the fact that public transportation can help keep the air cleaner. And so this was really a nice visual to really get beyond the idea of, are you taking the train? Are you taking the bus? Are you driving your car? It's elevating it to think more about the broader impact on the community and the beauty of where they live. So just kind of bringing that to life in a little bit different way here with this example. Another example would be was for a sports organization. They wanted to talk to women about how they think about the way women are portrayed in sports. And so we asked them to share an image of sort of how they see women portrayed in sports, and then how they think they would appreciate having women portrayed in sports. And so you can see here the example of this talking about, this is the way my friends and I look at a game. And here's the picture of how we see women portrayed in sports often. And these are not us. These are not everyday women. These are not us. These girls are not us. So just a nice way to bring that story to life for that client. So those are some examples of when we actually ask the participants to share photos. But sometimes another way we do it is we actually will share a collage of photos, and we will ask participants to, and these photos aren't really meant to be category specific. They're just meant to be a range of photos that could mean very different things to very different people. So in this case, we were asking participants to talk about the process of acquiring furniture through a rent-to-own, one of those rent-to-own stores. And we asked them, which of these photos best represents the way you're feeling as you're shopping and making the decision to get a furniture from this sort of store. And so the actual photo that people chose isn't as important as the way that it then the way that they actually explain it. And often they're using, I think, as Susanna mentioned, they're using metaphors and analogies that just make it much more rich than if they were to just explain how they feel shopping in this store. So you can see some examples. So one person was talking about how they saw it as a chess match, and sort of like that balance between, is this useful to me, or are they exploiting me with the way that the charges and how it ends up being more expensive to rent to own than if you had just bought the furniture. So thinking in those terms and knowing that the customer is going through this mental process just brought it to life. Another one would be H. So this person said, I leave feeling a little bit beat up with all the hidden fees that they didn't tell you about until after you sign the contract. So these two together, I think, really paint a picture of how people are thinking when they're, their mindset when they're in that store and feeling, they're exploiting me. They're beating me up. It's an uncertain, if not fraught, type of purchase. And so that's another example of how that really brings it to life for the client. So those are some examples, and I know you also, Wayne and Susanna, did something similar like this, where we actually had photos in the X Day session, and that was really really useful. But what tips do you have for researchers who want to use visuals in their qualitative research?
So probably the first tip, the easiest tip would be, you can start small, right? Start small, win big. Use visuals as an introduction. And those visuals can be from a deck, like a pre-populated deck, like that. If you're doing this in person, it can be from magazines. It can be from their phone, just as a way to get to know them beyond just hi, I'm Wayne, I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and I like to do qualitative research. You can have them pick like some of the social media challenges, like the 10th picture or the 7th picture or whatever number is relevant, or you just pick it out of the hat, to hopefully tell something that's a little more interesting or a little more revealing or a little more intimate about who they are, if the appropriate, if that occasion warrants it. But just to get beyond those first couple of questions. And again, that can be from a card deck, a physical deck, or if you're doing this in virtually, you can do the same thing.
And I'll jump in on that one. I've seen some people use, take a picture of one thing in your home that really represents who you are as a person, or your values, or what's important to you and your family. I think that one's really cool too.
Yeah,
and we also do it with teams when we're starting them up, to take a picture of something that represents fill in the blank. Either their brand, their experience, being creative, that's around them. Like, don't leave your desk, something that's right in your immediate vicinity to help reveal a little bit more, because oftentimes screen is blurred. You can't see everything else that's sitting on somebody's desk. That's the first one. Start small. Use it as an intro.
We really, one of the other things that we found, we obviously, once upon a time, all the work was in person. There really wasn't the technology to do it virtually, but all of these techniques can be done in person or virtually. So wherever you are, however you're doing research, there's opportunity for both. So the card decks can be in person. There's also online card decks that are endless. There's you can curate your own set of images, like the set that Jill showed. So if you're working on DigSite, pre-populating a variety of pictures for people to pick from. There's also some cool online, and I'm trying to think of a couple of them. I know one is called Deck Hive, where we have one of our decks where you can go and source pictures to use that are already kind of curated sets of images. But just, it's a place where you can really be creative, both in person or virtually, as you're doing that.
If you're using Mural or Muro, there's an icon as well as visual searches that are embedded in there that you can immediately, use the internet to unfiltered pull up something that can help expand on whatever it is you're talking about.
Cool.
In addition to the ones that Susanna mentioned.
One of the things that we think it's a super important tip, and I think all three of us have mentioned that as we've been talking about it, but to make it really explicit, is that we're using the pictures to help people share their story. So they are putting words, and we're doing a lot with the pictures as well, but we're going more than words, not no words, right? We still want to have an understanding of the cognitive as well as the limbic portion of the brain, the emotions and the mental part. So we want to pair the verbal with the visual. So I want to pick a story and then tell you why I think, that there's, what's at the end of the rainbow out here. But people can pick a random picture, and sometimes we even put pictures face down when we use cards so that people don't see what's there. And then they get a picture and they have to go, all right, I randomly picked this picture, tell me a story, and help that to connect. So it really sparks creativity as we do that as well. But we're looking for the experience. And Question Pro is all about customer experience, user experience. those kinds of things, employee experience. So as we think about doing experience research, that's what we're really all doing. People don't use products. The products help them experience their lives in a way that enriches and enhances them, solves a problem, fulfills a job to be done. But they're really looking for something to drive that. So when we prompt them, when we're collecting images for research, we ask them about their most recent experience or their worst experience or their favorite experience or their desired experience, ideal experience. But it's always kind of with that. So it gives them, I guess, somewhat permission to think more broadly than and more metaphorically than less literally. Now, that said, when we do this work online, we just had this with a client 2 weeks ago. We were doing some work with a retailer and we asked them about their current experience with that retailer, and please don't put in pictures of the store. Well, yes, we got back pictures of the store. So you just go and, on DigSite, it's easy enough to message them and just have them, give us a few more. And we specifically would like pictures other than of the store. But what is that experience like? So you just have to kind of help prompt people, because we're so conditioned to think, oh, what's my experience like? Here's a picture of the parking lot. Here, I go to this store, and you send a picture of the store. So some of the challenges with going online is you put in a search and you look up, retailer X, and then you get that picture back. So they're not really taking the pause to dive into the experience. So that's one of the things, actually, Wayne, we didn't even put that in our thinking about tips, but it helps people take that pause to tune into how they're feeling, not just I have to be, kind of sound smart and give an answer that makes sense. So we're trying to go a little bit below the surface. So then they can talk about what they want a little bit more. Did you want to build on that, Wayne? You had something else?
Yeah, I did. The other thing we showed it, but we didn't say it explicitly, but this is not about an individual picture that can be used on the back end to represent a collection, but it's really about leveraging the collection of pictures and looking for the patterns and themes, and using visuals is really like using a secondary language. It's a language that we can all, kind of relate to, but layering that with the verbal and the larger set to look for those patterns and themes can get you some different clues, some emotive clues around things that are really, really challenging to talk about, or that they didn't even realize. So we were doing work with a pharmaceutical company, and it was a very, very sensitive subject. We intentionally picked current experience and ideal experience as story topics to really pull those tensions apart. And what we saw out of the collection of pictures, and these were, the sample size was probably, high 20s or, low 30s. The current experience was really dark and dreary, almost to the point of being frightening, where the ideal experience was something that was light and bright and happy. It doesn't take a rocket science when you have a large enough sample. And I'm not talking about getting into quant, because again, this is directional qualitative. But when you're looking at the overall collection and looking at the overall patterns and themes, whether it's color saturation, whether it's individual elements, whether it's shape and tone and the pieces that make up these images, when you step back and look at this larger collage, it can give you clues to things that might not necessarily be apparent.
I love that. Thank you. So we did get a lot of questions about how visuals can come to life in your presentation of research results in your decks. Do you have any tips for, you've gone deep, you've gotten these insights, how to bring it to life visually for your clients? I know I shared that example of how they put the pictures up in the room with the quotes, and that was really inspiring for the team. But what about putting it into your reports and your presentations? Do you have any suggestions on how to have those visuals make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. You want to bring those pictures and stories to life. You want to bring their experiences into the room, because so often people get inside corporate research and they lose touch with what their everyday consumer's life is like and what their experiences are like. So you're wanting to bring their whole self to do that. And one of the ways to do that is through the images. So having as many visuals in the information. And there's tons of research and writing on kind of visual display of quantitative data. So we're not going to try and touch on that. We're more about how to bring these images in. So we would build stories. We actually facilitate the team to create a collective story and pulled together a series of some of the images that were kind of that helped to highlight that story so that they can then share that story. Because when we share stories of experiences, that's where we're seeing bigger, greater transformation and greater likelihood for change. So hang them up on the conference room, weave them into the decks, weave their stories in along with their pictures. So quotes and stories so that people can feel those kinds of things. One of the things that we do is we'll put up the set of pictures and ask, so if you're working with a stakeholder team, here's the images, and we might have curated them down to the ones that share the story, that bring the point, but ask them what they see. Well, they always see, I would say, yeah, not like every time, they see what the team saw. And then you get the senior marketing director saying, well, when we were with consumers, what they showed us was, and that person wasn't there. They never met a consumer in person, but it translates. So we get that transference of knowledge in that way, so that they're speaking to it as if they were in the room, in the field, in the store, in the home with the consumers. That pictures can be that powerful.
That's cool.
Yeah, the other thing that you can also leverage, obviously, is video and highlight reels to humanize the story and find a perfect example of when someone's trying to illustrate a frustration or a pain point or a driver or a motivation, to bring those in live, unedited. Oftentimes those raw reels can be even more powerful and convincing, particularly a senior group that might be a little more distant from the day-to-day, to say, oh, wow, I can totally relate to that. And now I see the need for making a package change or making a label change or making a formulation change, or why we're not performing in the way that we'd like to, by bringing that human back into the equation as opposed to just more data. I spent 15 years at P&G. I've spent more time in meetings where people would pound people with data and volumes of data, and nothing would change. And then you would bring the right story in that it would illustrate in a very human way that would allow them to relate to the topic in a new and fresh lens, that you're like, oh, wow, this is why we can't get over this hurdle.
100%.
So lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Lots of different ways to bring that in. Stories can really transform how that organization works. And then if you do it long enough and more and frequent enough, you start to train not only the team, but also managers to look for them and to ask for them and to want and see more of that kind of work, where you're using stories as opposed to, listen, we're not against quant data at all. I'm not trying to suggest that, but you're using this to enhance that so that you get to a better place and deliver a better experience, which is what everybody's trying to do.
That's great. And I love the fact that you brought up video. There's a couple ways we do that in DigSite. So we have a video specific response question. So we can ask participants, take about 1 to 3 minutes and record a video to tell us, if you had words of advice for the CEO of this company and how to make this experience better for you, give us that. And they'll do that 1 to 3 minute video. So if we have 30 participants in the community, we've got these great clips that we can then put together into a clip reel to tell a story. And maybe not everyone is comfortable doing the video, but most of them typically will. The other thing we often do is, if we have, let's just say we have an online community and we have 30 people participate for a couple days, and then we know that the client wants to go deeper on the topic, we'll find 5 of those participants that are the most articulate, or they have the best perspective on this business question that we're tackling. We'll then invite them to participate in an IDI after the session. And so then we can go a little bit deeper or go in some different directions based on what we've learned in the first piece of research. And so then that 30-minute IDI can also yield a whole lot of video that we could put into a clip reel.
That's been a super powerful way that we've used DigSite for the past 4 years, where we use that to get kind of a broad range of information, and then we use theirs and then do a Zoom follow-up meeting. And we've done it with physicians and patients. We've done a lot of medical research in that, and they'll go through and give us their pictures and their answers. And sometimes you can kind of get into a conversation with them. You can really dive even deeper on those as well. So we've done the exact same thing, where DigSite gives us a broader qualitative input, and then we can go even 3 clicks down, I guess, on that. We've also used it where the client has come in with quant data, and we're trying to understand, like, all right, help to understand why behind that, or why did this segment answer different than that segment, and really pulling them apart a little bit more. So we recruit specifically for a couple of different groups and put them through DigSite getting a lot of pictures in that. And so often, I mean, the power of this is that we don't have to have them all in one location in one market, right? We can have them all over the country or all over the world. If we can find them and get them into the study, then we can learn from them.
Yeah, and the yes and there, on top of the stacking like that you guys just talked about, outside of like pulling apart a really touchy subject, we've used it with innovation work as well. So after we've done traditional brainstorming, built conceptual spaces, put those ideas out back to the consumer panel, the DigSite panel, we had them pick a picture about what this represents, right? So how close of a match of the experience we're trying to create does it elicit back? Are we close or are we far away? We then went on with this one particular client, after they screened a fair number of ideas, they picked their favorite and they pitched it back to us, or pitched it back to a friend or a family member to see what concept translated over and what language are they using. Did we hit all the right notes? Are they catching the right benefits? Are there things there that we need to go back and tweak so that what we're propagating out there, what we're offering out there, gets translated in a way when real people talk about it, as opposed to product developers or researchers or brand people, or marketing or sales folks? How are they going to talk about it out in the wild? And that was super fascinating to really lay on those visuals, those videos, those clip reels as a way to get farther than just static numbers that you traditionally get.
I love that. And we
that
don't.
Reminds me of one of my.
Go ahead, Susanna.
No, it reminded me of one of our favorite ways to use visuals in research that we didn't talk about, which is to get feedback on concepts. Because if you've been doing research for any amount of time, the marketing team gives you a written concept and they want you to evaluate that in a focus group or online or somewhere. And what you get back when is editing of the words, because all they can react to are the words now there might be a product shot or something like in that as well. What we do is they'll read that concept just as created by the agency or the marketing department. And then we have them pick a picture that represents their reaction to that product or that experience. And, when you have enough people pick their pictures, so that gets their unarticulated. It also gets, if you're in a group setting, that allows them to have an unbiased response because they're not hearing someone else speak before they speak. And it gets away from kind of editing, cross out what you don't like and circle what you like kinds of things, because we don't usually, that's not helpful. We don't need editors. We need people to understand how a concept is landing with a consumer.
Yeah, and using that particularly in that setting when they're getting their unbiased reaction. Remembering back, we were working on a consumer product goods item. It was a really new and different hair care product, and the usage experience was extremely different, and they couldn't quite figure out why they couldn't move beyond a particular stage. And once they realized, and we did exactly that. We had them pick a picture right after their immediate usage experience, post it, save it, send it back to us. And it was so bizarre and so foreign that the usage experience, even though the product benefit was superior in every way, on every noticeable, measurable, any metric you want to look at, the usage experience was so strange that they couldn't get beyond that. So for a long time, they were working on all these other things when it was just that initial usage that no one had been ever able to pick up before, no one had been able to talk about before, no one ever had been able to articulate before. They're like, this is weird. That was kind of the language. But it was always discounted because it's like, oh, well, it's new and it's different and people always react like that. It's like, no, this was something really, really different beyond the strange that is inhibiting. So, concept development, persona development, journey mapping, all of those places where you are going to be using qualitative research to peel back and understand the whys, there's a way to play visuals into that.
100%. The example I was going to share was just building on what you said, Wayne. It wasn't actually using photos, but the idea of having participants put things in their own words and how they would explain it to someone. We'll have them write a letter to their friend and say whether they think this product would be something they'd recommend to their friend or not, maybe. And so they would talk about, how in their own words they describe this product back. Of course, marketers have their own ways of articulating it, but sometimes you really flip things around when you just get the participant to, all right, now forget about everything we've been talking about, put it in your own words. talk to your friend about what you've seen in this research today. And is this something you recommend for them or not? And just seeing the language they use can be really super useful.
And add a picture to that, and then they'll get even more.
Perfect. Exactly. So let me take a look at, see if we have any questions from our audience. I know I shared some of the upfront questions with you all. Were there any in there that really jumped out at you that you want to touch on?
I think you're on mute, Wayne, but
Yep,
so
AI.
yeah, one of the questions that I know had come in, someone had asked about how to think about using visual, how to incorporate AI with visuals. I don't remember exactly what the framing of that was, but that is just, the AI is super cool. If you haven't played with it, I mean, a lot of it is Chat GPT and writing in its words, but the connection in and then the newest things are in how you can create visual summaries of words. And so there's integrations on a couple of different platforms that I've played with where you can put in a transcript and have them create a visual summary out of drawings. I use one called Drawify that has been pretty cool in terms of doing that. But the best explanation and the best tip that I would have for that is, so AI can be really powerful. You can give it words and have it come back with pictures. I know whatever the different platforms are and the different integrations. But the best advice that I heard, and I think one that I'll hold on to as I keep learning about it and integrating it into our work, is always start and end with the human. So AI can be super powerful, and it's more powerful depending on the prompts that you give, the questions, the way you phrase things, the variety, the complexity of the prompts in terms of what you're asking for information or synthesis about, and then let it do its work and have it come back and take the human on the other side of it as well. So kind of the human sandwich where we say, all right, well, this is what we got. What does that mean? How do you tweak? How do you modify? Because it's not a put it in and spit it out and it's done. It's like, how do then we take what's generated through the AI process and you run it back through the human process in terms of how does that communicate what we're seeing and learning and understanding to help communicate or synthesize. So I think we can definitely incorporate that in, and there's some really cool ways that are out there using AI for that. But that, to me, that made the most sense, is always starting and ending with the human on that.
I love that. And we're adding an AI feature to our conversation task in DigSite. And our conversation task is one where we typically get a more meatier answer. We might ask someone about their process for something or tell us a story. And often it's a paragraph of an answer. And if you've got 30 participants, it takes a little bit of time to read through that. And we're incorporating an AI feature where it'll give you the 5 top insights that come from that. And that's not to say that those 5 insights are going to be the thing that's the end story, right? But it's a starting point, and it's something that will allow you as the person who's analyzing it to get a little bit more quickly into it and say, okay, these are the top 5 high level things. Now let me process this a little further with my perspective of what the business question was and read the results and then create the story that uses that just as a starting point to make me more efficient. So I think
absolutely, that's exciting, because otherwise we have to export all of that and then run it through AI
a generator
separately. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to know more about all the AI things that Question Pro is doing, definitely reach out to us and we can share more details about AI being incorporated into all our other tools, because there's a lot of great stuff happening.
You know, one of the other questions was how to convince managers around the robustness of qualitative versus quantitative.
That's a whole other webinar, though, probably.
That's a whole. I mean, I think I would start with, this is not an either or scenario. They're complementary, and by definition, they are incredibly different. You're not going to be able to get an R-squared or projectionable next to qualitative. It's not intended to do that. It's intended to help, provide some of the whys that the bits and bytes can't. One of the GMs that I used to work with at Procter & Gamble had probably the best explanation. I mean, your quant can give you the skeleton, but if you want soul and voice to go along with it, you're going to need to have some qualitative, because it needs to be able to connect back to the human in a relevant voice in a way that they can relate to. And I've yet to see a quant that does all of that. Without at least some complementary. And that's not to say one is elevated versus the other, but I think starting with some very high quality qualitative with thoughtful questions, with insightful synthesis behind it to distill the patterns and the thinking and the ideas that are being shared back with you in a relevant way is probably the best place to start if you're struggling for a place to go. Start small and build up that capability, because it is a very, very different muscle than quant.
Yeah, and I think it's all about defining your questions. What are you trying to dig more deeply into, and articulating that, and then designing the research accordingly. And I wouldn't even maybe try to use the word robust. I would, talk more about the stories and the understanding and the richness and the explanations, more than, I think when you start to use a word like robust, it starts to feel like you're measuring them similarly,
Correct.
qual versus quant. Yeah.
Yeah, it just adds. It's like spice, right? If you're cooking, going back, it enhances, it broadens, it deepens the depth, it deepens. So that's redundant. It creates a different depth of the insight than just what you might find with quant alone. It's not to say it's going to be better or worse, but it might be a little more relevant and a little more appealing.
I love it. So do you want to quickly share your slide to show how people can get in touch with you if they want to learn more? And then I'll do my last slide. Do you still have that in your deck or not?
Yeah, Dan.
Or you can just tell people where they can find you.
Let me see.
It was on the last slide.
I think it's just on the last slide.
I think I took it off. Let me get
Well,
it back.
let me share mine, and then we can go back to yours.
That's
So
fine.
thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Love to chat with you about qualitative research. And I think there were some questions about how to do qualitative research in DigSite. So I would love to have individual conversations with folks and talk to them more about that, and how we can use it to help you with your specific business questions. I think that's always the most useful way to talk about DigSite, is not to show you a demo of all the features, but to talk about, here's your question or here's your challenge, and how can we help you with that?
Absolutely. And we always welcome conversations as well. If people are curious to know more, we're happy to talk with you. You can screenshot those and go straight to our LinkedIn, or find us through our emails or websites as well. We also have an AHA page on LinkedIn. Most of our stuff our information is available for either of us there as well.
Terrific. Well, Wayne and Susanna, thank you so much for joining me today. Love chatting with you. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Jill. We really enjoyed it.